So you want to study in Canada. Let's discuss about why Canada is such a great place to study first, and then I'll tell you everything about it in this video. First things first, some of the topmost universities all over the world are in Canada. On top of that, Canada is one of the very limited countries that allow you to have a 3-year postgraduate work permit after your degree, up to 3 years essentially. So it can be shorter as well. We'll talk about that in this video, but up to 3 years you can get. On top of that, Canada is literally the only country which has such a well-versed pathway to essentially getting from let's say a degree that you get in Canada to getting the PGWP to basically getting actually a permanent residence, which is essentially your green card to stay in Canada forever. You can even become a Canadian citizen after that. On top of that, Canada has a pathway to sponsor your family. And I'm not just talking about your spouse or your children, which by the way, most countries anyway allow, but you can even bring your parents, your grandparents, anyone in your family to Canada with you. And that's an ability that almost no country boasts about. And finally, if you're going to Canada and you don't like it there, you can move to the US as well from Canada. Once you gain Canadian residency, it's actually quite easy to move between the two countries for jobs as well as PR as well in many cases. Now those are the perks. The perks sound amazing, right? So let's dive in. Let's talk about the best locations that you should be looking into if you are targeting Canada. So the top 3 locations on my list would be number 1, Toronto, where universities like the University of Toronto exist, one of the best universities in the world, of course. The second location on my list would be Vancouver, where universities like the University of British Columbia exist. And I'm going to end my list with Montreal, where basically universities like McGill University exist. All of these are very popular names. I'm sure you might know of them already if you've been thinking about studying in Canada. Let's talk about the intakes. Fall is the biggest intake in Canada, just like the US. So your education starts in September. That's really the biggest intake. All the courses are available, and the deadlines for this intake are between December to January for some of the best universities out there. The second biggest intake is spring intake, where you start your classes in January instead of September. This is the second biggest intake, so there are quite some programs still available, and the deadlines are somewhere around September if you're targeting this one. Finally, the most limited, and I would say the smallest intake, is the summer intake, which starts somewhere around May, and the deadlines are somewhere between November to December. So make sure that you apply a little bit earlier as compared to the deadlines that I'm telling you about. That's really the maximum time I would recommend applying. Let's talk about the best courses to study if you are going to be pursuing your education in Canada. These courses will have the best job opportunities and would have a good quality of education in Canada. So we're going to be starting with business on my list as number 1. Then there's going to be engineering, followed closely by computer science. Then any courses in healthcare and medicine, nursing, dentistry, those are also great options. Then there's business analytics, followed by data science and AI. All of these programs are quite popular. I'm not saying that there are not any other programs such as law or something else that you want to study maybe, right? All of those may be good options, but again, you're going to have to do some research on that front by yourself. These I know are good options. Next, let's talk about money. The most important factor if you are going to study in Canada, you're going to see a drastic difference between the tuition rates of schools in Canada versus the US. US is there, Canada is really here. So let's talk about those. So the annual tuition of a bachelor's degree in Canadian dollars would be somewhere around $15,700 to somewhere around $53,000 per annum. For a master's degree, it's an even bigger stretch, starting from $10,000 and ending up somewhere around $80,000. It really depends on what kind of a degree you're going for. For instance, management degrees would be towards the upper end of the spectrum, and master's degrees such as engineering would be towards the lower end of the spectrum. Finally, you have PhD degrees. PhDs, like I always say, PhD is not a PhD unless you're getting paid for it. So to me, if you're paying any tuition for a PhD, don't go for it. It's got to be fully funded only. Now remember, the fee and the deadlines, they vary based on the program, like I said, and the university. So make sure that you verify them on YMGrad.com, where you'll get the most up-to-date data. Let's talk about the accepted language tests if you're going to be studying in Canada. Canada prefers these tests for the most part. You can go with TOEFL, IELTS, or PTE. All of these tests are very well accepted in Canada. Certain universities may not accept every single one of them, but if you're looking for the best one for Canada, IELTS is the best one to go for. Let's talk about the application process. If you're going to be applying to the universities, how do you go about that? The first step would be to shortlist the right universities. And this is the biggest blunder that many students make simply because they would go ahead and select universities that are either too ambitious for them, or they would select universities that they don't really deserve to get into. They can get into much better than that, right? They can get much better. So if you are not able to find the right balance, you have to strike the right balance. Otherwise, you're basically wasting your time. And that's why it's so important to shortlist the right universities based on the history of admissions and rejections that other students like you have got with. And we can help you with that. If you need help with that, you can always WhatsApp me. We also have the profile evaluation and university shortlisting support, where we can also personally shortlist the universities for you. Next, you need to meet the minimum requirements to get into this university that you've shortlisted. Maybe you have 5-6 universities, 10 universities in your shortlist. We want to meet the minimum requirements to get into those. And the minimum requirements are usually based on your CGPA, your percentage. So you should have maybe a minimum percentage, minimum CGPA, right? The next thing on the tests that you're going to be taking, and I'm specifically talking about language tests here, such as the TOEFL, IELTS, could be the PTE also. Finally, there's some standardized tests, such as the GRE, GMAT, SAT, ACT. Some universities may require one of these tests. Please keep in mind, though, that not all of them will. So if you want waivers for these tests, we can help you with that. Once you're done with all of that, you need to make sure that your SOP, your statement of purpose, is looking tip-top. It's very important, because what that means is that that's your opportunity to essentially present yourself in a way that is not just numbers and metrics and all that. You get to spill out your emotions to the admissions committee, and then you can build a case for why you should be given a spot in their university. If you need our support on that, we have Ivy League graduates who already made it to some of the topmost universities out there, who can actually help you get to the perfect version of SOP that you deserve. And for that, you can take a look at the SOP drafting service, or you can WhatsApp me for further support. After all of this, you have to submit an online application. It's easy. There's not really very much to do over there. And finally, you have to pay an application fee to apply to these universities. If you're working with us, for many of these universities, we'll get you application fee waivers, so you can save your money over there as well. Finally, I want to talk to you about the postgraduate work permit. The reason why many of you are going to Canada to settle down there, to get a job, right, at the end of the day. So once you have finished your degree, you get a postgraduate work permit. Yes, you do. And these values that I'm showing you, they are recently updated in February of 2024. There were some changes made to these rules, so I'm going to be talking to you about those. First, master's degrees. And this is also where the biggest change is. So if you have a master's degree that you study in Canada, and the degree is just at least 8 months in duration. So if you study anything over 8 months, right, at a DLI, Designated Learning Institute, in that case, you can get 3 years of PGWP. That's insane. Earlier, this was not the case. You had to study at least 2-year degree. Now, with just 8 months as a master's degree, you get a PGWP of 3 years. But if you're talking about other degrees, such as bachelor's degrees or any other kind of diplomas, in that case, if your duration of the degree is less than 2 years, but more than 8 months, you get the exact same amount of PGWP as the duration of your degree. For instance, if your degree is, let's say, 12 months long, then, and it's not a master's degree, in that case, you will get a PGWP of 12 months long only. Of course, if the other degree, which is not a master's degree, is more than 2 years long, then you still get 3 years of PGWP, which is the old rule again, by the way. So again, the rules have changed, and for master's applicants, I think it's extremely amazing, simply because even with a shorter degree now, you get 3 years to work. In Canada, you can just study for 1 year and work for 3 years after that, and then you can get on your pathway to PR. It's extremely simple. Of course, once you're on your PGWP, you can apply for the express entry or PNP schemes, and then you can get to stay permanently in Canada. And again, if you need help with any of that process, you can reach out to me anytime. Now, this is a lot of information I've given you. It may be a lot taken, I understand. Hence, if you ever need help, you can reach out to me on WhatsApp. I'll be there to support you wherever possible. You can also follow me on Instagram, where a lot of information just like this and specialized programs is given out to you, so that you don't miss out on anything that the smart student should be leveraging in today's day and age. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. Subscribe to the channel if you like the video, and share it with the people who need to know. Goodbye and take care until next time.